Greetings in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. I'm Andre and joined here today with John Peach and Iver Lofving. And we're going to start with a presentation from John Peach about some updates in the oil reserve situation. And then we'll have some discussion about various topics that arose in the Peak Oil chat group over the last month. All right, take it away, John.
Great. So, you still see the charts?
Yes, yeah. I've maximized them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Rystad Energy is an independent research, and I guess an independent research company in Stockholm, and I guess every year they produce a chart like this that says how much oil they think is remaining. And so they've got these different categories. There's a 1P showing 285 billion barrels. 2P is 505. 2PC is 1283. And then there's this 2PCX, which is sort of their top end, 1,624 billion barrels. The number that I tend to like is the 2P, and that's the one that is sort of right in the middle of what everybody thinks is left. But the 2P depends on who you ask. Turns out that my 2P and Rystad's 2P are very close. And I think they do it in a slightly different way than I do. I look at the total discoveries to date minus the total production to date and say, okay, that's what's left. And they do something where they take the remaining reserves for every producing country and say, okay, add these all up and this is what we get. What they also have done, though, is they've subtracted any kind of questionable reserves. That back in the 80s, OPEC inflated their reserves suddenly. And so a lot of people are taking OPEC's word for these sudden inflation reserves. But Rystad says, nope, we don't believe it. And a lot of the rest of us don't believe it either. There was a post or an article by Roger Bentley that came out this past week where he's been looking at this Rystad data and said, hey, this is really kind of low, right? I think he believes in this 500 gigabarrel remaining is likely. And in fact, I think he mentioned the 285 and said, look, if this is right, we're really in trouble. Mm-hmm. So anyway, let me show you what I've got for remaining reserves. And so here's the 2PC, which is fairly high. The 2P, mine is slightly under 500. I got 495. I think they've got 505. So that shows that we're very close in our 2P numbers. And the 1P also is quite low, under 250 billion barrels.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to clarify for the audience that instead of understanding as 1P, like 1P is like proven reserves and 90% can be extracted, and 2P is probable reserves and 50% is most likely to be extracted, and 2PC is speculative reserves. Like we think we're there, but we're not 100% sure, and about 10% are likely to be extracted. Is that about right?
Yeah, good point. Usually it's 1P, 2P, and 3P, and the 3P is the 90%. So this is the 2PC is a Rystad designation. They've got the 2PCX, which is a bit bigger.
It just seems to me like that the reason they're doing 2PC and 2PCX is to stay away from the idea of 3P, because like people were very upset about, well, it's just imaginary. 3P is just imaginary.
Right.
But this 2PC and 2PCX isn't a whole lot different. Like if we go back to that chart, we can read what they include in 2PC and 2PCX.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was saying, well, could you just click back there just so we can read it for the audience?
Yeah.
So yeah, 2PC is proved plus probable plus mean contingent recoverable oil reserves. I'm not sure what that means. Do you know what that means?
Yeah. I'm not sure what that is either.
Okay. In yet undecided projects discovery. So this is like ones that they haven't decided to do, including non-commercial volumes. So this includes volumes that are too small to be used for commercial production. Maybe someone fills their own oil barrel or whatever. And then 2PCX is even bigger, and I don't know, that they're adding risked prospective resources in yet undiscovered fields. So this is undiscovered stuff. They haven't even discovered it, but they think that it might exist.
Yeah, it's really out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's very speculative at that point.
Well, okay, so some of this 2PC and 2PCX also includes tar sands, like Canadian and Venezuelan tar sands.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not been including those at all because I think the EROI for those is too low. And once we run out of the good stuff, there's not going to be enough energy to go after, something that's got an EROI of 4 or something, right? It's going to be left.
Yeah, I know Rystad is very skeptical about the tar sands, and that's why they only give Canada 35 billion barrels there. But yeah, you can continue with your presentation. I just wanted to clarify that for the audience.
Yeah, this is a good point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let me skip ahead to the next one, which is a couple of differences here. So the red here is discoveries that I've got. The blue is production so far. And then if you take the difference of those two, you get this green curve that's remaining. It's I think it was 735 billion barrels. And then the X2P remaining is 495. So one of the things that I've been using this backdating method that Jean Herrera has been saying that we should do, which means that if a field they've already found, in 1965 or something, but then they now decide that it's got another 20 billion barrels in it. He says we should put that 20 billion barrels back to 1965 because it was actually found there. We just didn't know that. We just adjusted the known size of that field. So yeah, maybe I don't know. I don't know how much of a difference it really makes, but it did make a difference in my projection for how much additional oil could be found. So there was it was a little bit questionable. But one thing I've been thinking about lately is that it doesn't really matter for this endpoint, right? That kind of everybody agrees. Here's how much oil has been discovered, whether it was discovered yesterday or in 1965. The total is still the same, right?
Yeah.
And the production is still the same. So the difference remains the same, okay?
Mm-hmm.
At the end, the end point. And if we're using 36 billion barrels a year, we're now discovering, maybe 12 billion barrels a year. So about a third, right, of what we need. So it means that we're using 2/3 what we're using, 2/3 of what we're using every year is from previously discovered oil.
I just have a question, because when I was reading the Rystad report, they were saying that we produced 30 billion barrels just like last year. So I'm just not, because you just
Yeah,
26. Mhm.
their production numbers are considerably lower than IEA's and EIA. So
Oh, okay, that's why. Mhm.
yeah, I'm not sure why, except that I think that especially EIA inflates the numbers. Well, it doesn't inflate them, but they include um, uh, gas liquids and refinery gains and things like that. So
Oh, okay, okay. So that extra 6 billion barrels is coming from, not from conventional or unconventional oil. It's coming from natural gas, biodiesel, and that kind of stuff.
well, yeah, natural gas liquids is
Natural gas liquids, the main
yeah,
one.
that's
Okay.
the biggest source.
Mhm.
So yeah, how much we're actually using is also up in the air. But if we're using, let's say, about 25 billion barrels a year of previously discovered oil, in essence, right? That we have, well, 24 of previous and 12 of new oil that we found, right? So the way to think about this is that we're using, roughly 25 billion barrels a year of new oil, or I mean, previously discovered oil,
Mhm.
which is an easy way to calculate how much remaining we have. So that means every 4 years we're going through 100 billion barrels, right? So every tick here is 4 years, right?
Oh, okay.
um, if the X2P number is correct, then that's 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 years, right?
Hmm.
That's it. That's the oops all gone number. And this one would give us another, uh, you know, 10 years or something. It's not much.
Hmm. And so this is based on the 2P numbers.
Yeah. So okay. So the purple one is Rystad's X2P number, right?
Oh, okay. And then the green one is yours.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So another way of thinking about this is if um, with Rystad's numbers, they're a little bit lower, but the time frame is probably about the same. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe 30 years, and we really run out. So
Because I was doing it based on what you were telling me with that 90% and the 50% and the 10%. And if I do it that way, with the 2PCX as the speculative, then I get a result of 14 to 15 years. And just on proven reserves, it's like 10 years, but that shifts. And one of the things I noticed was that, based in comparison to last year, Rystad, so last year it was 10 years
mm-hmm.
remaining in proven, and now it's 9.5. And so it went down by like 12 billion barrels or something. And then, but the proven reserves went down by 30 billion. Sorry, the probable reserves went down by 30 billion barrels. And then or 43 even. And then the speculative increased by 50 something. So it was only the stuff that we imagine is there that increased, but the stuff that is proven and probable decreased substantially.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
In any
So,
case,
mhm.
it seems like we're in kind of trouble here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one last slide, I found this. What was it? Okay, this was also a Rystad, and just the big takeaway here is that they're showing a 40% decline by 2040, basically.
Hmm.
Uh, just because of natural declines in oil well production, and so they were trying to come up with, well, okay, if we're going to have a 40% decline, where could we possibly get it back, and they've got some spare capacity, some shale oil, a bit more offshore, a few things, and maybe they get back. But
it seems like there's nothing on oil sands.
Yeah. So I think we agree on oil sands are kind of worthless.
Yeah.
The shale oil seems like they're being to me, it seems like it's a bit optimistic, but we'll see.
Offshore, excluding OPEC. Okay. So they think that it will appear offshore, basically.
Yeah, I guess a lot of it comes offshore.
Yeah.
And this OPEC spare capacity, really?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I know America has been claiming that Saudi Arabia and stuff is lowering their production intentionally, but I don't know. I don't see any evidence of that. Like based on what I was seeing, the Gawar Dar, it's very depleted.
Yeah.
It's very depleted now, and I think they're lowering production just because they're running out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the export land model that Jeffrey Brown came up with probably 15 years ago. It says that as production declines in a producing country, that their exports will go down first. Right? They want to keep their citizens happy before before they export too much. But of course, I mean, they are going to be stuck. That they're depending on their revenue from exports, so they've got to keep the money flowing in. But if they cut back on internal consumption, then what happens? People get very upset.
Yeah, and so that I think they were having that issue in Russia. Russia is reducing its exports now. Is that right?
That's true too. Yeah, and again, same thing. That didn't you post something about something saying the price of gas is going up? Why is the price of gas going up in Russia? And probably because they're cutting back on production, and maybe they don't have as much as people think they do.
I wanted to open the floor if Iver or Lilah had any questions or comments about John Peach's presentation, because he's only here for a few more minutes.
Yeah, sorry, my video not working, but I just posted something in Peak Oil from the Oil Drum, and it's fascinating. It was a whole debunking on peak oil. I'll put it in the chat because I found it so interesting. And I went through and my point on kind of the I don't know if you can, maybe that's a hard link to see. I have to let me just do the article, but it's fascinating because their whole premise is looking at how technology is more important than the geological part of peak oil. And all the predictions were wrong because they only look at total liquids. They don't look at discovery rate. It's fascinating to me. And to me, it's an example with statistics. You pick what data points you want to look at to tell a story. We've got, it's going to be really hard for us to tell an alternative story because I think this is how the average person or how, the media or, kind of the the technologists are talking about energy.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to get the story across that we might be in trouble because people really want to hear that.
Yeah.
Or, that we're going to be saved through, electric vehicles or something like that. That's a very compelling story to tell. people want to hear that.
Well, the other question I had, because the article was also focused on how peak demand is really the important piece to look at. And they were projecting peak demand by 2030 or 2040. And I just don't, even understand how that's even possible with growing population and developing countries wanting to catch up to our income level. Even if we were to replace existing cars, what about everybody else joining on the car bandwagon? If we were totally wrong about peak oil, I just don't understand how peak demand is even a thing.
Yeah.
And with Jevons paradox, there's just so many things to me that just peak demand piece also doesn't make any sense to me.
So I've been thinking that what they're trying to say with peak demand is peak consumption. And there is kind of a discrepancy between the production and the consumption curves, because during the production phase, some of it is put into savings, like those strategic holdings and things that they have in the US and in some other places in the world. And during the summer, for instance, a lot of those were being heavily depleted to keep the gas prices low. So we actually reached peak consumption where we consumed the largest amount of oil ever. I think it was in August or July. And so that's what they're talking about, peak demand. But yeah, eventually they're going to run out of these savings of, saved gas or whatever. And then consumption will, of course, have to decrease because there's just won't be anything to consume. If say that the strategic reserves are completely depleted, then it's going to be based on the production numbers.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Iver?
I saw something recently where they predicted that we would not hit peak production until 2028. Have you seen that? Basically, I think it was either Kurt Cobb, somebody in the oil drum or something that said that we would sort of hit a plateau starting around now, all the way through 2025, all the way through 2028, before we start to drop off in the actual amount of oil that we get. I don't know if anybody else saw that. I thought it was nonsense, and it was CNC. It wasn't. It was oil plus condensates, etc.
Yeah, I think Art Berman has been saying that actually.
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, maybe there's more in the Permian than we realize, but it does seem like that was quite a stretch. But I'll defer to Art on that one.
I thought so. I thought it seemed a little optimistic.
Yeah.
So am I understanding right that he's saying that we're going to reach peak consumption in 2028?
I think he was saying peak production, right?
Oh,
yeah. He was saying that we would basically hold on this production plateau, basically from now all the way to 2028 before we start to drop off. And
okay.
I don't know. I mean, even if we do, what percentage of that is going to the U.S., Canada, etc.? Because if the BRICS come up, then BRICS away, that we might they may eat up more and more, and also of course export land model, etc. So even if we do, the whole world produces more. It doesn't mean that we get more.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing, I think a caveat on that is we've been juicing this system with quantitative easing and spending significant portions of our federal budget on stimulus. And if we have any sort of major course correction, I don't know how we can also keep production going at these high rates. I could definitely, in essence, we've allowed ourselves to consume more than what we could typically afford. So I'm just wondering if we have a major, global downturn. I don't know if we're going to be able to keep up with these rates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does seem like it was a money thing more than anything else. They kept the shale oil coming, right?
Right. Yeah, they lost what, $500 billion
Yeah.
on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just before you go, I wanted to have a look at this graph over here, because this is basically a version that you made that projects if it continues at the current production rates. And I was wondering if you could make another one that extends those graphs until the end, and then we can I can make another one that includes all these peaks, conventional peaks, and then we'll find out if the 2035 number lines up with our probable reserves based on the Rystad data, for example.
Yeah.
Because this was also half of conventional production over here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll have to make up some expected decline like we did before. But yeah, it's easy to bring that forward.
Okay, great. Yeah. Because I want to be able to give people the when I'm doing presentations or something, show people where it gets to the bottom.
Goes to zero. Well, of course, we could. I wouldn't be surprised if we suddenly discovered that we were being a bit wasteful, and we could.
But doesn't that go into Jevons paradox?
Yeah. There's a lot to consider here, but maybe we don't have to commute to work every day. The pandemic showed that people could work from home, and maybe some of that will continue. I don't know. There could be things like that.
Yeah.
But,
well, scarcity industrialism is, predicted, and it's where people do conservation measures. And I mean, there have been several historic phases where people were like, yeah, let's do conservation measures. But then we get various, people elected who are like, no, let's not do conservation. Like Jimmy Carter, he was big on conservation measures, but people didn't like that. And then they elected Reagan, who got rid of conservation measures. And then we had, in Ontario, we had a liberal government that was doing conservation measures and helping people insulate their homes and lots of green initiatives like that. And then we had the conservative government elected, and they got rid of everything. They canceled all the contracts and no more helping insulate people's houses or anything like that.
Yeah. And there's only so much you can do with conservation, too. There's a limit.
Yeah. Because the food production, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay, I guess I better cut
Okay.
out. So, good to see you guys.
Okay. See you.
See you next time. See ya.
Yep.
I wanted to.
Well, I'm going to open the peak oil group, and then we're going to go to reviewing what's been new in the peak oil. If Lilah, I know you said you were you had posted something in there, and we can review that if you want. Go ahead, Lilah. Can you hear me? Oh. Okay, Iver, can you try speaking? You're muted right now.
I think mine works.
Okay, your works. Okay, yeah, because I can't hear Lilah.
No.
Okay.
Maybe she'll get it back together here.
Yeah, she might have to reconnect.
I know. I keep getting kicked off and have to come back on again.
Yeah, that's weird. I'm not sure why that's happening.
Oh.
Yeah. So were there some things you wanted to talk about on the peak oil group?
Yeah, I thought this was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading this book called Slime.
Okay.
It's about algae and stuff. It was very interesting. 49 million years ago, algae cured a hothouse Earth, and left a story how it did it written on the seafloor. Carbon dioxide levels were 100 times greater than they are today, and the planet was entirely ice-free. And there was like a giant ocean in the Arctic Ocean that was completely covered around. And so what happened was, in the summer, the Arctic Ocean, 1.5 million acres, was covered from shore to shore in a thick, vivid green carpet of Azolla, a tiny fern that grows in fresh water, because all the fresh water would pour on to the top of the sea, and it would just sit there, and then the Azolla would just take over. And the crazy thing is, because the sea below the surface was anoxic, what would happen is all that Azolla would sink to the bottom of the ocean, and there was nothing to eat it. And every spring, another crop of Azolla took over the surface. This lasted 800,000 years, and all these annual blooms were buried in sediment and compacted over the ensuing millions of years, ultimately becoming the billions of barrels of crude oil that lie under Alaska today. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
And so they sequestered carbon dioxide, reducing the concentration of the gas in the atmosphere by almost 80% in less than 1 million years. And the Azolla event brought about the return of the planet's ice caps.
Yes.
So that's what did it. So all that captured, 800,000 years of captured sunlight is what causes this, the oil that we get from Alaska. I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Similar things.
I remember reading about it. Yeah, the Azolla event. And definitely, it's kind of like the opposite of what we have now, where we're increasing the carbon dioxide. So I think there's kind of a middle ground of you don't want the whole Earth to be covered in ice caps, but at the same time you want to have some ice caps. Otherwise, the equator becomes uninhabitable.
Yeah,
if you go into hothouse Earth. Then that's a large amount of productive area over there.
But that you need things like the Azolla and others. Have you ever heard of EHOX? Also, EHOX, which is Emiliana huxleyi. That's a little diatom that has a lot of carbon in it. It's like a carbon structure, and it sinks to the bottom and turns into limestone. So you need that, as that was the planet's carbon pump. Obviously, so basically it would lock that carbon up for, millions of years, and it formed like the cliffs of the White Cliffs of Dover, etc. So you need something to lock the carbon up. Otherwise, the carbon is, it's going to come back out. We're going to, like us, we're going to find it and burn it, But we're not going to, the limestone rock is not useful for that. Anyway,
so the Azolla thing was 49 million years ago, so it was around here. So during the Eocene optimum, and so 800,000 years. So like over here, this dip, and then I guess we had Antarctic glaciation, Antarctic thawing, Antarctic reglaciation, and then rapid glacial cycles. So this is what smoothed out the Canadian shield.
Yes.
No, flat.
Just kept ramming.
Yeah, exactly. Kept ramming it down and down. Yeah.
Yeah, he just kept grinding it down. But I mean, the thing is, the Azolla event was the only thing that really kept us, because the PETM was really hot. Everything was very hot.
Yeah.
And
During this time, there were crocodiles in the Arctic. And the largest land mammal, if I remember correctly, was like 30 or 40 pounds. And it was a horse. That was a horse, and it was like a very lanky horse because it was extremely hot, and so it needed to get that heat off.
Yeah, and it was all clustered around the poles. Most of the life was clustered around the poles. I think it was because too hot.
Yeah, Ellesmere Island was heavily inhabited. Like that, there was trees all over Ellesmere Island, and that's where the horses and the alligators and all those other things were. Yeah. That's the northernmost island, other than Greenland, I believe, that is in the Arctic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've had people talk to me recently about abiotic oil and all this kind of stuff, and how greenhouse gases are good, and etc. And I think they've been reading a lot of junk from the Heartland Institute or something. They didn't really understand, I mean, you look at it and you just go, okay. Right, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So So there's a lot of different versions of reality out there. I prefer to believe in scientific reality. You can see there's the you just put it on the screen. See, the Arctic Ocean was kind of bounded. It was just a sort of a circle sea.
It was like an inland sea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what allowed the Azolla to do that, because it didn't get washed away by the currents. It just kind of floated all across the North Pole, and then it would sink.
And I'm sure there were other events that caused a lot of oil to happen also, but it was always, it had to be trapped.
Yeah,
but trapped under there.
Yeah, notably, a lot of this didn't actually turn into oil. Like, I know in a lot of the Canadian explorations of the North, they found that much of the stuff used to be oil, but because the crust is so thin over there, that it actually turned into natural gas. And so there's like a mix of natural gas pockets and oil. And considering how difficult it is to harvest oil there, it's just not economically feasible. Certainly not at this time. Yeah. No. Oh, Lilah, I was wondering if you managed to get your audio working. No. Well, we can't hear you if you're speaking. You might need to change your microphone in the audio settings to a different one that works. There's a little up arrow near the microphone. But yeah, because I was looking forward to hearing what you had to say about, you had made an article here about the oil price. But I guess we'll look at some of the other stuff on peak oil for now. Was there anything in particular that stands out to you, Iver, for over the last month?
Well, just that person predicting that we would be on a plateau from, I think it was Art Berman. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. And oh, okay. Iver got kicked off. Oh, Iver, you need to unmute.
I got kicked off, but I'm back on now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so
connection.
Yeah, do you have a link for that Art Berman thing?
No, I'm gonna look for it. I'll look for it on my phone and see if I can find it and let you know. Mm-hmm. That might be it. That back up a little bit there.
This one? Or
no? It's just on peak oil.
Alice Friedman on moving away from oil. Reality checks on alternative energy. I can see if Art Berman is mentioned. Nope. Yeah. These online meetings can be finicky sometimes.
Yeah. But anyway, they basically, it may be Kurt Cobb. It might have been...
So yeah, it says here, we are facing a massive transport fuel deficit. No nuclear fusion or renewable sources can compensate, as the surplus energy from liquid fuel vanishes in the rearview mirror. Their use will be increasingly limited to essentials, war and agriculture. I don't think war is essential. Absolutely not. No, we're going to need to move away from war because we're wasting so much energy just blowing things up. That's a waste. And but agriculture, I do agree, is essential. And we're going to have to start moving people to the rural areas and promoting human rights and stuff to avoid wars, in order for us to have a transition where people stay alive. And then putting an end to the fantasy of electrifying the Titanic as it slowly sinks into the Atlantic. That's pretty funny. Yeah.
Putting an end to the electrifying of the Titanic.
Yeah. Well, I think that they actually made a replica of the Titanic, and they're gonna try crossing the Atlantic again and seeing if they can get to the other side.
I'm sure it would be great. Mm-hmm. That the one thing was the Titanic, apparently they had bulkheads that were supposedly unsinkable, right? But the bean counters said we can't make the bulkheads go all the way to the top to save money. So they became completely useless because the bulkheads would just, once it got over a certain point, the bulkheads would just flood. So somebody decided to save money.
Right, exactly.
The White Star Line.
Here, energy demand side, Jane O'Sullivan explains why the United Nations projection of a future world population are unrealistic. And I guess this would have to be. I mean, this is fairly obvious. If you don't have the energy to feed everybody, then the population can't continue increasing. This was one of the things in the limits to growth study, that the population kept going up for a long time after the food declined massively.
Oh,
hey, Lilah,
I think that will happen.
Try unmuting and maybe we'll be able to hear you.
Yep, I just had to switch to my phone.
Yes, we can hear you. That's so great.
Oh my goodness. I missed a lot. I was enjoying the slime discussion, and I'd actually put a link in the chat from a recent roundtable with Nate Hagens. He had a couple of oceanographers discussing our current state of the oceans and the very real possibility that we're pushing ourselves into another slime event.
Oh yeah, it's quite possible.
So I definitely recommend listening to it. It was quite sobering.
And another thing is that not just the slime event, but there's this call. I don't remember exactly, but it was basically anoxic oceans. We're already seeing an increase in anoxic events. So basically what happens in a hothouse ocean is that these anoxic events expand until they include the majority of the ocean. And then what you have is that the sky turns green from hydrogen sulfide. And hydrogen sulfide, it doesn't rise. It actually stays close to the ground. And the seas turn purple because it becomes bacterial dominated. And then you have these toxic gas plumes going from the ocean and then just killing everything on the shore. And the only thing you can do about it is trees. Apparently trees can neutralize the hydrogen sulfide. If you have a large enough expanse of trees, like 100 kilometer squares of trees between you and the shore, then you can avoid dying from anoxic inhalation, hydrogen sulfide gas.
They sometimes call it Canfield Ocean.
Canfield Ocean. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
really scary.
Yeah. So that is a worst case scenario if we get to RCP 8.5 or something like that. Then it could happen. Like, as you can tell here, the Atlantic is already having a lot of these anoxic events happening, both on the American side and the European side. And then the Pacific is starting to have these anoxic events happening too. And so it's happening. It's already happening. It's a matter of, will it get so bad that it starts killing things on shore from the hydrogen sulfide?
Well, this is part of also the discussion on the AMOC, which, again, that controversial article that came out, I think, last month, saying that they're expecting the AMOC to shut down sometime between 2025 and the end of, or 2100, with a pinpoint around 2050. But that's where things get dicey, is when that shuts down, then you're no longer having that oxygen conveyor belt, having that cold water being pushed upwelling and bringing, oxygen-rich water to the top layers. And that will, this is, that's why they call shutdown of the AMOC as the mother of all climate risks.
Yes. So basically what would happen is that Europe would get much colder, because the AMOC right now is bringing that warm ocean currents up to Norway and Sweden, and that's why they can grow grapes in Sweden and Finland. But that's if that goes away, then it's going to get colder there. And I know that even this year, Finland was still having snow in June, or like some like it was very late in the season for it to be having snow anyways, like weeks after their frost date. And so that could be an indication that the AMOC is definitely weakening. And during the Canfield Oceans, we do see that it stops or reverses, it just stops altogether. And then Canada will get warmer as well at the same time, and that could lead to feedback loops of the permafrost defrosting and releasing large amounts of methane gas. So also not very pleasant, because that would exacerbate the problem.
In our community, I live in a co-housing community farm, and filled with lots of scientists, and we're all thinking about, well, what should we grow? Do we need a full, we're trying to invest in like year-round greenhouses, but the more these risks stack up, I'm wondering, how safe are we really going to be? And I don't know how we can even be resilient under these stacked risk scenarios, to be honest.
So my recommendation is to be at least 100 kilometers away from the ocean. And I mean, or be far enough north that you're not going to have those Canfield Ocean effects, because they're going to be localized, right? They're going to be at near the equator or whatever. If you live near a relatively cool ocean, then you should be all right for at least your lifetime. And then to also plant a wide diversity of anything that produces food or is useful from all over the globe in your community food forest. And it's going to have to be a food forest. It can't be raised beds or some kind of halfway measure, like greenhouses or micro. You're going to have a large expanse, like 3 acres per person. Or in the tropical areas, you can get away with half a hectare, which is like 1.5. But if you have 6 months of winter, then you need at least a hectare, which is 2.5 acres per person. And then you want to have also lumber trees, but lots of fruit and nut bearing and bean bearing trees, and then some from colder climates and some from warmer climates. And that's because of the oscillation of the polar vortex. And so if you just plant hot things, you might have a cold snap, and then they'll die or they won't produce that year, and then you're going to be hungry or possibly starving. So you need to also have some of the colder things just in case you start getting frosts, because it's unpredictable. That's why you have to have a diversity, and then based on what grows well, then you plant more of that as time goes on.
So we're doing some of that. We have some foresters who are actively, trying to transition the forest as well. And we're planting lots of nut trees, and we're constantly. I mean, it's a food forest here, and we have tons of gardens. But I'm thinking about, British Columbia is on fire, or how do we, even if we plant well, I'm not really sure, if you have massive fires growing, ever worse over time, even your forests aren't necessarily safe per se.
So I've talked to foresters in BC, and they tell me that this is actually happening because of human intervention. Basically, for a long time, they have been noticing that more and more deciduous trees are trying to grow, like aspen trees. And aspen trees are extremely fire retardant, and they create a moist area with their leaves. They turn into humus that retains water very well, and they create a moist climate that is very unlikely to burn. But what the lumber companies are doing is they don't have any mills in British Columbia that can saw hardwood lumber. And so they just cut all of the deciduous trees. They cut all of the aspen, all of the fire retardant deciduous trees, all of the maples, anything that will stop a fire. They cut it all out. And then they plant only highly flammable trees like spruce, pine, like ponderosa pine. Ponderosa pine can only reproduce with fire. And almost everything about it is highly flammable. Like a spruce or a pine, when it creates the needles, they do not turn into humus. They turn into a very flammable understory. You put you throw a cigarette there, the whole thing will light up. Which is completely different than if you have a deciduous trees. So if you're concerned about forest fires, then I recommend a lot of deciduous trees. And
That's what we're actually doing. We're
Yeah,
transitioning and planting a lot of deciduous trees.
Yeah. And so I talked to some foresters, and they said that with deciduous trees, you don't have to worry about forest fires. The largest forest fire you're going to get is from a lightning strike, and it's just going to be the inside of the trunk. It's not even going to spread to other trees, at least not during the growing season.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think the highest risk is after in places like Alberta where they have a dry spring. And so they have a point where the snow has melted and they haven't yet gotten leaves. And so that would be the only place that a deciduous forest could have a forest fire. But as soon as it gets leaves, it's no longer going to happen.
Yeah, April was the time that's the only time that you really have to worry about it before the leaves come out and when it can be hot in a deciduous forest.
Yeah.
But then after that, once they get the leaves, they're practically unburnable.
Yeah, and if you have if you live on the East Coast, you're probably getting April showers, so you're fine.
Well, not necessarily. At one time, we were camping in an area that was closed because of forest fires in April, and we went into the park at a different area. We were backpacking along, and this helicopter came over, and they said, high forest fire danger. Please leave the park. So we felt like we were we hadn't seen anybody. So we were with our backpacks. We're running out of the park somehow. We got out before they caught us. So,
yeah. So was it a pine? What kind of?
It was deciduous, believe it or not, with a little pine, piney areas. But it was deciduous. But it was in that early April before they really got their leaves on.
Oh, okay.
And very dry. It was a very dry spring.
Oh, it was a very dry spring. Yeah. So those are the times that you'd have to worry about it, as if you have a dry spring and the leaves haven't gone in. Yeah.
But otherwise, it won't burn. I know we had a maple sugar lot for 20 years, and there's no way you're going to get a fire started in there. And
there's one more thing that you can do is spring bulbs. Spring bulbs come out in April. And so if you have a lot of spring bulbs, they will create leaves on the ground layer, and they will be, transpiring humidity, and they will raise the humidity of that area and reduce the risk of the leaves from the previous year burning.
Yeah, and we need to think beyond just our community, because, obviously we're in an agricultural region surrounded by, forests. So we need to figure out how to connect with the broader region so that they're thinking in similar fashion. Because if the rest of the forests are, losing their deciduous trees and, they're not practicing, good forestry practices, we're still vulnerable if everyone else is not.
For sure. I attend the local county council every week. So not every week, but every 2 weeks, because that's when they hold their meetings. And so I find that's a great way to connect with the mayors and the deputy mayors and their staff, and also the people that go there to present. And I can talk to all of them about, hey, let's do it sustainable. Let's plant those deciduous trees. And, I can talk to them about, any counter arguments they may have. And I present them with, I have little pamphlets with the information and stuff like that to get them up to speed. And so that can really work. And if you have a community, You don't all have to show up, but I mean, you could, but like at least have one person go there, report and maybe talk to some people. That will get you into the local politics, and then help spread those ideas of let's do it sustainably. Because when I was first coming there, they were trying to promote things like high density living, more apartments, more condos. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, that's just not going to work. We can't do that because we won't be able to feed those people, and it's just going to increase crime. So we need to do sustainable lot sizes, 10 acres or 10 to 20 acres for a family farm, and then people can live sustainably. Let people camp, let people live off grid. Those are the kinds of things we want to promote, because those are the only ways people are going to be able to live after oil.
What about is co-housing, like, communities being allowed for zoning as well? Is that an option?
Sure, for sure. I mean, it depends on how it's designed, right? I mean, if it's designed with a sustainable density, so say for instance, everyone gets 3 acres. So if you have, I'll get a calculator out, but if you have an average community of 60 people and each one has 3 acres, then you're going to need to have a community that's 180 acres to support 60 people. And then if you have 6 months of growing season, then you can do 150 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're about 75 people, and we have 270 acres.
Oh, 75. So 270. So you 270.
3 acres each.
Yeah, 3.6 acres each. So you guys are good. You guys are in the clear there.
Yeah, no, this was designed more than 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
based on like the limits to growth.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Where is it, in BC?
No, I'm in the U.S., Vermont area.
Oh, in Vermont, yeah, because I'm in Maine, and I've been going to we've been forming a little group called Community Resiliency Committee, and we're talking about sea level rise and places that are most likely to be in trouble here in Maine, on this island in Maine. And it's very interesting to look at what is actually going on,
So we also have some YouTube questions. I just wanted to get to here. Peak of everything. When we reach, this is from Sentinel. When we reach the point that take more oil to extract 1 barrel of oil, and all the oil left in the ground will be useless. Oh, he wanted to know that. I guess that was really a question maybe John Peach could answer. But yeah, that would depend on the energy return on investment. And it would be after we're done with conventional oil, basically, or most of the conventional oil. And what's not economical is like the tar sands and the shale are barely economical. But it's not just the point of where we extract 1 barrel of oil and the is useless. We actually need it to be an EROI of 9 or 10 or more in order to maintain our current industrial civilization, just because it's so auto dependent and it's so transportation dependent for the global economy. So our society will have to drastically change in order to accommodate a lower energy return on investment. And then I don't know if you guys had any comments on that, or okay. And then another question from Sentinel: people count oil as a whole, while the only oil that matters is the one it make an economical return. Fair enough. And then they ask, Lilah, do you have a YouTube channel? No, you don't? Okay. All right. That's all the YouTube questions we have for now. So yeah, we can continue our discussion here.
Well, I agree with them. I mean, the problem is we've used up, especially in the United States, we've used up a lot of our, the shale oil, and now we're moving further and further west and further into the Permian and other places where, really the Permian was one of the last not the last place it's discovered, but one of the last places in the continental, the lower 48 that was discovered. And that became kind of, we're kind of moving into that. And once we've kind of fracked that out, where do we go then? I mean, I don't know if there's any big pots of oil to, squeeze more out of. I've been out in the Permian in that area, and there's, it's West Texas, and it's Midland, Texas, all that stuff. You think about it, it was like maybe the 1940s or 1950s. Remember the movie Giant with James Dean? That was kind of the area that was all discovered later. And I think once we fracked that out, I don't know, where do we go after that? I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm showing a picture of it now. This is the Permian Basin, and it looks, I don't know, to me this looks like Eastern Texas or New Mexico. Oh, maybe it is Western Texas. Yeah. Okay.
West
New
Texas,
Mexico is west of. Yeah. Okay. And then so it's kind of in the boundary of several states here. But yeah, that's what it looks like. I'm not sure what the red and the green
I'm not sure
is.
what the red and the green is, but that definitely makes sense because it's kind of all in that area, Midland, Odessa, all that like sort of West Texas kind of, Staccato, that whole area there.
Some
So
is in New Mexico as well.
Yeah, New Mexico also.
I heard that they have much declined in terms of a new growth. But what they are doing is so a lot of people think shale, oh, it's going to save us, but it's very energy intensive. They have to not just drill it down, but then they have to make horizontal boreholes, and then they have to fill it with fracking stuff, and then blow it up, and then a little bit of oil will dribble out of the cracks, and then they suck it up from the bottom. And they found that they can actually get more oil out of it if they line all of the boreholes with steel, and then they make additional horizontal holes, and then they frack that, and then they can get a little more. But I mean, you're lining with steel. I mean, that's very energy intensive.
Yeah.
So, and here we are with other risks impacting our ability to frack shale, which is depleting water reserves. And one of the things that to me is really troubling about fracking, it's a no-win situation. We're mining our water in places that are basically needed for agriculture. And we're going to be increasingly making decisions. Do we need the energy or do we need the water? And then, of course, the pollution side of where this wastewater is stored. And we're not even thinking about the hydrological cycle. We think we can just put it underground and it'll just stay there. But purely from a process standpoint, the water is a really big issue.
For sure. Yeah. New Mexico is one of the driest states, and it's part of that Permian Basin, so they're probably depleting the aquifers for it. So I found out what the green dots are oil wells and the red dots are gas wells.
Oh, so it's mostly gas for the West.
Yeah.
I bet that's what that other one was. The red is sort of more gassy than.
And the orange is both.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing about it is, I was thinking, okay, let's say Art Berman is right and we kind of stay up until 2028 and then we start to drop worldwide. Why don't we do something? I mean, I'm just like amazed that we're pumping out the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and everybody, it seems to me, according to Facebook and things, everybody's flying around and doing as much stuff as we're up to consuming as much as we ever did. Meanwhile, it seems like 3 or 4 years from now is not very long. It'd be nice if we could figure out something, but from my experience, I don't think we don't really look ahead like that. We don't really figure things out, and we're not really even interested in slowing down at all or putting something aside for the future. I kind of wish we would, figure out a way to make it so that more people live.
Yeah.
Okay life, but we're not really doing it.
I have another. So there's some new YouTube questions. Mattia Tanzi asks, "There's a certain ratio of gasoline to diesel and other oil products in any given barrel of oil, one which cannot be fiddled with too much." And she continues, "Electric vehicles replace gasoline use only. Diesel used in long distance transport from trucks to locomotives and ships cannot be replaced by neither batteries nor hydrogen."
Well, and we also have the asphalt that
Right.
needs to come from that barrel of oil. Yeah.
And I guess that could come from tar sands too, right? Because I mean that's mostly tar.
Not the fracking though. The fracking, some of the stuff was so light, the stuff that came from the back end up in North Dakota, that it actually is explosive just as sort of, crude oil. And they saw that in Quebec, where a train out of it rolled down the hill and blew up a town. So the stuff was so light that it only makes gasoline.
Yeah.
Those liquids. It doesn't really make much diesel.
I do want to go back. You were asking what's next after shale. Companies like Chevron and Shell have been talking for the longest time about Kerogen, which is kind of, the the next energy boondoggle. But that's it's even less energy content than shale oil. But that's kind of the real source rock, and it's you got to do a lot of work to squeeze even more energy out of it. But there's a lot of that if we had enough water and energy to release that stuff. So I guess we can always go to Kerogen.
So what is exactly Kerogen?
It's wax, basically.
Oh, it's like fossil wax?
Well, it's very hard to get out of the rock. That's the problem. They tried it in Wyoming. There was a place, Gillette, Wyoming. They were working on it for a long time, and they kind of gave it up. But it was this crazy boom town up there where they tried to get this rock, this Kerogen to come out. And the problem is, it is okay. It's same stuff, dead plants, algae, etc. But it's really locked into the rock, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's like a sedimentary rock that's infused. It's almost like a precursor to oil, and you've got to really do a lot of stuff to it. But there's a shitload of it. So, I guess if you think technology all we have to do is just substitute with the next thing, well, there's plenty of Kerogen if we wanted to try that route.
Unfortunately, I can't get pictures of it because some cosmetic brand decided to call itself Kerogen.
Well, it is. It's kind of maybe that Wikipedia. It's kind of it's a hope. Now, everybody's been hoping that it would work for a long time. And again, I don't know if it really, if it can be unlocked profitably.
It says there's 10,000 times more of it than living things. But yeah, the issue there is even if we manage to tap like this and all the oil in the world, we'd be ending with those Caledonian oceans.
Yeah.
So we make a lot of money in the process.
But we'll all
exactly.
be dead. We'll be dead.
The Canfield Ocean.
Canfield Oceans. That's right.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, the crazy thing is, we've figured out we're too clever for our own good. We figured out these ways of keeping ourselves, going the way we are. And, really, it's almost like it's not amusing enough to just have a car and live in a warm house and, talk to each other on the internet and things. We have to also figure out other ways to burn oil, that we don't even, really need.
So I got another question here. I think it's pretty easy to conclude the Antarctic is next on the drill list. I have great doubts about that.
Well, there may not be that much there, because they were saying the reason that this Arctic Ocean thing was such a boon was because you had that Azolla event. So the thing about that is that was up north and all of a sudden it worked. But maybe the Antarctic, and there might be some oil there, but I mean, they might not have had the events that they had in the northern hemisphere to produce the oil. I mean,
And
there
it's
is
also 3 kilometers of ice.
yeah, but I mean, hey, they're going underneath 20,000 feet of
Oh, right. Yeah, I guess they're
water
going.
right now to find stuff. So
Yeah, I guess you're right.
they might find something down there, but you know, we're getting to the point where, you know, even if you find something, is it going to be a Saudi Arabia or something, or is it going to be a?
And it's not going to be anywhere on land. That's what we saw from the estimates from Rystad is the future. Where is our future oil going to come from? It's all offshore. It's like it's because it's definitely not coming from the land. We've already checked. We've already discovered everything, and there's just nothing else to find. And the other issue with Antarctic is that say you build something, but as you're pumping it out and you know, warming up the planet, the ice shelf starts to collapse under you. You know, so that's gonna put another big dent. And so we got another question here. Knowing the ratio of diesel and gasoline is pretty much fixed, a rise in EV production volumes would thus give rise to oil demand, as paradoxical as it may sound.
Well, I mean, I've always been an advocate for very small EVs. I mean, if you had a very small EV, you could go and get your groceries. And, you know, we had one for for 10 years, we had a really small one, just a little neighborhood electric vehicle. And it used a tiny fraction of the amount of energy that a regular car does. So, I mean, I think if you go with that and you quit having this giant, 10,000, whatever, 6,000 pound vehicle to go get a loaf of bread and jug of milk, it's you can go to a different whole paradigm, but nobody's sort of willing to do that because they can't even imagine driving something that's smaller than what they're doing.
Well, and there's, Ivor, some interesting data coming out on behaviors. So, when people get a more efficient appliance or a more efficient automobile, they'll actually consume more. It kind of creates a good feeling like I'm doing well, so I deserve that extra cupcake, that energy cupcake elsewhere. I can't tell you, and wonderful friends of mine who are environmentalists and care about the environment, but their behavior is so disconnected from the reality. When I talk about sacrificing flying as much, I'm limiting it to work and trying to be thoughtful. They just don't understand how I would even do that. They're like, well, you can't, what about, you want to stop seeing the world for the rest of your life? I'm like, well, yeah, maybe I don't need to see the world when that's helping to destroy the world. Perhaps, I can rein in my behaviors. And that is just blows their mind. And to them, it's all about, well, we just need the right policies. And, if we, got this green product and like, that's really, doesn't really make that much of a difference. We're talking about really dramatic demand reduction, and that is just off the table.
We have friends that are ardent environmentalists, but when you talk to them about not flying, they are furious.
Yeah,
they're furious. They go, well, we recycle, and so that's going to make up for all the flying they do to Alaska to see the last polar bears.
Well, they actually went up to Manitoba to see the last polar bears in those giant buggies, which you think about, they did not even see the irony in it. And they couldn't possibly understand it, that they were flying up to see the last polar bears, which were.
Yeah. And then like emitting a bunch of carbon dioxide in the process.
I read a great article, I should send that in the link as well, by the Sri Lankan author, and he was quoting the Limits to Growth report, and he talked about how ironic it was when he was in New York and he saw everybody recycling and how proud they were. And he's like, in Sri Lanka, most people don't even make garbage. And that nice recycling you're doing in New York gets shipped to my country that just sits there as garbage. So there's just such a disconnect. If you really want to take a deep dive into, becoming ecological, make as little garbage as possible, take as few trips as possible. If you need to make a trip, make it matter. And, you don't need to satisfy some sort of desire, for happiness. Perhaps plant a garden and find the beauty in your backyard. But that just goes against where we are culturally.
Well, I kind of feel like if you have a real reason to fly, you're going to go see your mother and she's dying or something like this, I can see it. But if you don't have a real reason, and we just haven't had a real reason for like 15 years, have not had a real reason to go fly around. And I feel like a lot of people are still way into that, they have a bucket list and they have to do it all, all this kind of thing. And
I have a theory why we're so disconnected. And I think part of it is people are really unhappy and are trying to find meaning. And, I don't want to really dive into the religious piece, but, we're so disconnected. One of my close friends was here recently, again, an environmentalist. And while we were in the forest, I was trying to point out the trees and the various species, and they didn't know them. And they just, were talking to me over and over again of like, why am I going to miss city life and all the things I'm giving up? And I'm trying to show the ecology and the things that you can connect with. And I think there's that need for stimulation is because they're unable to feel stimulated by the environment. There's a lack of connection.
Yeah, I was thinking about it as I drive along. I look at the trees and I kind of know what they are. And I sort of think in my head, oh, that's a nice maple or that's a beautiful whatever. And I realize they don't even know what it is. It's a green blur to them. As they drive around or they walk around, they have no idea what they live in. And they don't really care that much. But meanwhile, as an average person, you can name every car you pass by. You know what it is. It's a Honda or a, whatever, So it's different cultures.
So I have to go in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get through. We've got a little backlog of the YouTube questions or comments. The plastic is coming from the crude too. All that poison, the chemicals is just heartbreaking. Microplastics in the rain too. So yeah, and then, the war in Ukraine is accelerating our energy transaction. I'm not 100% sure what they mean. I don't know. I don't think it is actually helping our transition because, they're using fossil fuels and then blowing them up. And then with the depleted uranium, they're taking nuclear waste and blowing up nuclear waste and contaminating the soil. So that's not really helping either. But peace would help, and human rights would help as well, because then there would be less conflict and people could, especially if we have land distribution, if we had a peace agreement that included land distribution for the eastern Ukrainians and the occupied regions, then that could help towards transition, because people could, everyone would get 3 acres or more or whatever, and then they grow their food forests, and then they'd be self-sufficient, and that really would help with the transition. And then I got the manufacturing of EVs take more minerals, nickel, cobalt, graphite than the other internal combustion engine counterparts, since the mining and transportation of the minerals is done. Yes, we've covered this in many Simon Michaud.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
it all takes a lot of energy.
Yeah. Oh well, it's just we know that it takes more minerals, and that's why we can't do a 1-for-1 replacement.
No.
Yeah.
No, it'd be hard to just do them anyway.
Maddie Tanzi also says, almost exclusively by diesel engines, which electric drivetrains cannot be replaced due to the reasons above. Demand for diesel will actually increase with a wider adoption of electric vehicles. I'm not sure necessarily that it would diesel be necessarily. It could be coal. You do need energy in order to produce electric vehicles. It doesn't have to be diesel. But yeah, we are running out of diesel because we're running out of conventional oil. and we have to mix in that shale tar sands with the tar sands with the shale in order to produce diesel. And then 2001, Alexa Taloni says the issue is the consumption going into the vehicles, all the tires, the plastics for the billion vehicles. Every Indian and African are going to buy these things, and the issue has only begun. That's also true, and it depends on how long they can afford to do it, and things like that as well. So yeah, that's all the YouTube questions.
Well, you know what? There's a different model kind of happening also in a lot of countries where you have not electric vehicles like you're thinking about. People get around on electric bikes.
Mm-hmm.
There are little tuk-tuks. Have you ever seen those things? They're three-wheelers, and they're used as taxi cabs. So a lot of people use much smaller things, and they have a lot more people on them. So I think they're much more efficient per, gallon of gasoline or amount of electricity that they use. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it almost like leapfrogs our crazy technology where everybody has a car and drives around in this giant beast. A lot of people have much smaller and less energy intensive ways of getting around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, it is notable also that the range is lower. It's much lower for electrical vehicles. And so it would create a more localized economies where, you don't go as far. And so you have to get things locally.
Yeah. You have to start up the local economy again where you get, you drive down to the farmer's market or whatever and you buy your food, you get some stuff, trade some things.
Yeah.
And then we come back,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not a bad idea. I mean, if we could do that, that'd be a much better world than the one that we're creating now, which is, these giant concrete and asphalt raceways for our gigantic vehicles,
Mm-hmm. And I know also that I was researching, and with the amount of lithium reserves we had at the time I was looking, is there was enough for each person in the world to have a 1.5 kilowatt lithium ion battery, which is enough for an e-bike, but nowhere near enough for a car.
No, cars, I think people, this is the thing that's going to piss people off more than anything else you could say. But I think cars are kind of impossible in the future. I mean, I was even thinking, if we have 10 years of proven reserves left, we might be on our last regular cars or, maybe one more car and that's it. You think about 100,000 miles, that's, conservatively 100,000 miles. Do we have 100,000 miles left on a regular vehicle? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna bug people more than any other bit of reality.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could play the futurist, I think a smart segment of society would pool the resources to start sharing. If you're in a community, you start sharing vehicles. And then I would start, you can probably use significantly less, and eventually you'd want to have a breeding program to have, horses and other, beasts of burden to, support more, support that role of transportation.
Mm-hmm.
But you can at least in the meanwhile, share on the way down.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And notably, like a horse can't actually walk much further than a human in a day. It's like 20 kilometers, is your range when you're traveling by horse and buggy. And that's in one day. That's like because they walk at 5 kilometers an hour. And if you try to push them faster, they won't go the whole distance because they're going to get exhausted, or you're going to have a dead horse on your hands. And
well, I was selling real estate, and Amish people showed up, and they talked about it, and they said they wanted to be about 15 miles away from a town where they could get things, etc. So that was it. That was the limit of their horses, horse and buggy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. That's where you got to be.
So it's like 5 kilometers an hour. So it would take them if it was 20 kilometers away, take them 4 hours to get there, to do their shopping trip, and then there's another 4 hours to get home.
Yeah, that's the absolute limit. That was the absolute limit.
Yeah.
That was as far as they were willing to go.
Yeah.
And
So
they
so
did move in.
20 miles, that could be 6 hours both ways. Like that's very long.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. And so yeah, I just wanted to. Okay, we got 1 minute.
Okay.
So 280. So this is from 2023. Here. So 2022. If we compare these numbers, so 1P was 298. Here, I'll just maximize it for people. 298 proven barrels, and then 2023 is 285. So it's gone down 7 billion barrels. And then it was 2P, the proven reserves was 548, and it's gone to 505. So we've lost 43 probable reserve barrels. And so but Rystad gave this hopeful conclusion saying like, oh, we've increased our reserves over the year, and that's all in speculative. That's all in these yet undecided projects and discoveries, including non-commercial volumes plus risk prospective resources and yet undiscovered fields. So that's the only increases: undecided projects and undiscovered things. So yeah, not a very helpful outlook for the oil situation. All right, was there any last comments you guys want to make before we close for the day?
Yep. So we use about 30. So that's only about 9.5 years, you said, for 1P. 2P is about maybe 20 years, right?
So if we do the 1P numbers based on 90%, I did it. So here, I guess I can't show you right now, but it was 298, and then we multiply it by 0.9, and that's 268, and then we divide that by 30, and we get 8.94.
Ouch.
Okay, so that's proven.
Mhm.
Right now, probable. Okay, probable includes the proven. Okay, so we have to subtract it out. Okay, so 298 minus. Okay, sorry, I'm doing the numbers for last year. Okay, let's do it for this year. Okay, so 285. So last year it was 8.94. 285 times 0.9 is 256. And now we do it by 30 billion barrels, so 8.55. So we've got 8.5 years, and we used to have 9 years of oil proven reserves. And so now we do the 505 minus 285. So that's 220. Or actually, we could do the whole 505 and then say 50%. Plus 505 times 50%.
17 years.
So then, but yeah, I think we have to do the whole number. Okay, so then we have 252, and then we divide that by 30 barrels, and then so we get again 8.4. Okay, so I think you have to add them. So
yeah, so about 17 years.
Okay, 17 years. It's just and then the 2PCX is 1624.
So that's who knows what it is.
Yeah, but that's but we're basically 505 times 0.5 plus 1624 times 0.1, and then we divide this all by 30. We get 22 years. Yeah.
22 years. Okay.
Yeah, but if we were to do just like, because I mean it's arguable how to calculate this properly. Because yeah, but yeah, somewhere between 8 to 20 years.
Right. Left.
22 years.
Total. That's the total.
That's the total. That's the most probable total.
Yeah.
That's because I mean, there's always going to be a range. It might be less, it might be more, and then the EROI will drop before then, and then once, like, we're already seeing, the homeless people in the streets and all drugged out and all that stuff. And in Canada, we're the number 2 country in the world. And that's still happening in like places like Vancouver and Toronto, and even here in Owen Sound, I saw one person that was like drugged out and leaning on the curb, and and we do have increasing crime and things like that, even in this small town that's relatively rural.
Andre,
So,
quick question. The 22-year estimate, is that based on like a static current level consumption?
Yes.
So yes, that's based on 30 billion barrels a year.
Okay, because one of the things is you can see each year, if you have a growing GDP, if the overall economy is growing and population is growing, we're going to have increasing consumption levels. So that 22 years is not, unless we have, recessions year after year, it's not going to be 22 years. That's going to get gobbled up much more quickly. So we'd have to do an estimate based on what the average growth rate has been over the last 10 years and then project that outwards. Right. Otherwise, the economies would fall under the weight of interest payments for debt, because it does require continuous growth to be able to make those debt payments.
Yeah, and that's why we may experience a collapse-like scenario earlier. But yeah, it's difficult to project exactly how much consumption we're going to be doing, because if we're limited by production, then the consumption will also decrease. So that's why 22 or 8 to 22 years is the probable range, is because of the fact that we just don't know if we're going to have that decline and it's going to be a sustained decline, or if we're going to have an increase, or if it's going to stay the same. And so that's why we go on, it's going to stay the same, just because that's in between the two.
And these economies are going to hate not having 3% growth. They're just going to freak out. They're just going to go berserk. So I think not having 3% growth is a big problem, and they're all going to try to get back to it or pretend to get back to it. But it sounds like one thing about that projection by Art Berman and stuff is we're not going to have 3% growth starting very soon. We're on the top of this plateau. It's not going to hold up. So we're definitely not going to get the 3% growth, but we may hold up the total amount worldwide till 2028 before we start to drop off,
Well, that might be a good jumping point for the next discussion. I think spending some time on the economics, I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about is just the fact of how much the federal government has been spending. And it's an anomaly because usually when you have those types of spends, it's during times of high unemployment rate and recession cycles. But we're actually doing it during a time of low unemployment rate. And a considerable increase in GDP. And I think it's partly because that's the only way to keep the economy floating right now. That's how close we are to popping this bubble. And so all they can do is accelerate the gas right now, because the alternative is terrible, unfortunately. But it has to happen. Nobody wants it to happen on their watch. Honestly, I'm not looking forward to it. It's been a great party collectively. The downslope of it's not going to look good. So I think we collectively are going to do everything in our powers to keep this going. And that's just going to make the downslope so much steeper.
Yes, like a cliff.
And we haven't reached the consumption down point, as one person here mentioned, Matty Tenzi, that our oil consumption hit a record high of 103 million barrels per day in June. But that was mostly gasoline. So notably that there was less. I'm not sure if the total energy was higher than before, but and that was a lot of depleting strategic reserves and natural gas solids and things like that.
That's got to be total.
Yeah, that's total. Yeah, that's total, including all of those much lower energy density fuels.
and pulling out of our reserves and everything. Yeah.
All right. So let's just end with like a message of hope that if you guys, you're peak oil aware, then just like us, you can work towards setting up intentional communities, or joining co-housing communities, or joining Anabaptists, or someone who has land and helping to create food forests and sustainable living that's kind of post-peak aware. And that's the best thing we can be doing, as well as cultivating love and kindness in our hearts for ourselves. Having faith in God that all is well and all will be well, and then recognizing the divine within ourselves and our spouses and our family members and our close friends, and then all the world. And with that generosity and kindness, we can create a good world for all of us. Okay. So we leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite creator. Okay.
Thank you, Andre and Lilah.